Then we say, make 2 into 4 like this, and click Add. Then make 3 back into 3. Hello everyone. We're here with the third lesson of our SPSS from Scratch series. In our first lesson, we got to know SPSS in general. We gave an overview of what you see on the SPSS screen. In our second lesson, we explained data entry using the sample survey you now see on the right side of the screen. The topic of this lesson, as a continuation of data entry, is how to perform reverse coding. We'll do this again using the sample survey on the screen. If you want to follow along with me, we'll continue with the SPSS file we worked on last lesson, which you can currently see on the screen. If you didn't do the previous lesson together with us, you should download the file named DERS3, which is the version of this file at the end of the previous lesson. You can find where to download the file in the video description. I'm assuming you've paused the video and downloaded the file, so let's get started with our lesson without wasting any time. First, I want to briefly explain what reverse coding is. In our previous lesson, we used the sample survey you see on the screen. Within this sample survey, under the 8th question, which we also prepared entirely as an example, there was a scale called the managerial behavior scale. This was a 5-point Likert type scale. We explained what a Likert type scale is in our previous lesson. With this scale here, the participant provides some responses regarding managerial behaviors. They evaluate managerial behaviors using a total of 9 items here. They do this evaluation by giving scores between 1 and 5. And at the end of this scale, this is actually why we call it a scale, the participant gets a score. In other words, they give a score. A total score or an average score. Depending on how the creator of the scale prefers, the evaluation is done either with the average score or the total score. If the evaluation is based on the average, then here, for example, an average score between 1 and 5 is obtained for the whole scale, and let's say it's 3.22. If the average of the 9 items comes out to 3.22, we understand that the participant has evaluated the manager's behaviors according to this average. This average has a meaning, and this meaning depends on the structure of the items here. If the items here are generally positive in nature, as they are in this case, what do I mean? When you read through the items here, I think they are distributed fairly overall. I think they act respectfully and are fair. We see that there are positive items like acts respectfully and tries to be helpful. If the average here is high, it means that the manager's behaviors are positive. That's what this average indicates. A moment ago, we said 3.22. 3.22 is above average, which means that the manager's behaviors are evaluated positively. Or, we might not base the evaluation here on the average. We can also do it based on the total score. Here, since there are 9 items, the total score will range between 9 and 45 points. A participant can give at least 9 points and at most 45 points. For example, if the participant gave a total of 38 points, which is very close to 45, we can understand that the manager's behaviors were evaluated positively with a score of 38. However, we have a problem here. If you pay attention to items 6 and 8, while the overall evaluation is positive and the items are generally phrased positively, these particular items are structured in the opposite way. For example, in the 6th item, it says, our managers do not arrange our working hours fairly according to the work we do. Our 8th item, I don't think our managers are helpful people. Now, if the participant gave a score of 5 here, if they rated this as 5, it means that the managers are not fair in the 6th item here. But in the 1st item, a score of 5 was a good thing, and in the 2nd item, a score of 5 was also a good thing. But in the 6th and 8th items here, giving a high score, evaluating it as high, is not a good thing anymore. So if I include the 6th and 8th items directly in the overall average, in the total score, this will create a problem, because the score of 5 here actually shows that the manager has a negative behavior. So what should I do about this? Before finding the overall total, before calculating the general average, I need to reverse the 6th and 8th questions. What does reversing mean? If the participant gave a 5 here, I should change it to a 1. If they gave a 1, I should change it to a 5. If they gave a 4, I should change it to a 2. If they gave a 2, I should change it to a 4. There's nothing I need to do if they gave a 3. So, what does this achieve? If we're going to calculate the general average or the overall total, if we count this as a 1, when they gave a 5, the participant actually meant that things aren't being arranged fairly here. If things aren't being arranged fairly and we're going to evaluate based on positive scores, if we count the 5 here as a 1, then we won't be making a mistake in the overall total. If you want, pause the video here. Make sure you fully understand what I mean, then let's continue. This is what's called reverse coding. It's also possible to do this reverse coding one by one in Excel, but in SPSS, we can do this very easily. All we need to do is select the relevant items in a moment and specify which values we want to swap in those items, then give the command to make that adjustment. Let's move on to this without further delay. I think the details of what reverse coding is are now well understood. To do this, after entering the data here, we need to go to the Transform menu. Under the Transform menu, there's an option called Recode into Same Variables, which means recode onto the same variable. And here, there's recode into different variables, which means recode onto different variables. We can use either of these two. We can use whichever one we want, but there's a difference. If we use the one on top, the recoding will overwrite the item we changed, and we won't be able to get back to its original state. But if we use recode into different variables, in other words, the option to recode as a different variable, we add a new version of the item we just modified to the dataset. And if we want to use the original version again later, we can find that variable again. As for the new version, we can include it in the averages we'll calculate in a moment. There's not a huge difference between them. I want to open both of them together. I want to show it like this. Earlier, we selected recode into same variables at the bottom. Now, let's select different variables. Let me stack them on top of each other like this and explain it to you here. Actually, there's not much of a difference. When you want to code as different variables, you just see a section here called Output Variable. Here, it will ask us for information about the name and label of the new variable. But below, this section doesn't exist, because we're overriding the same variable. We're performing an override operation on the variable. That's why we see that this section about a new variable doesn't appear here. Let's continue with the one on top, but you can also use the one below if you want. But let's not use the one below, let's use the one on top, so we can see our reverse codings as separate variables. Now, what we need to do first is to check which items are reverse coded within each scale. This information is always provided. We need to read that information. Let's assume we've read that information, and it tells us that the 6th and 8th items are reverse coded in this scale. So, what we need to do is move the 6th and 8th items over to the right side here. After doing this, it asks us, what should I replace the 6th item with? What should the new variable be called? We can write it like this. For example, we can write YDO6, then an underscore, and then T, or we can write reverse. After doing this, we can write something in the label section. But I don't think it's necessary to do that here right now, because I can easily paste it in a moment. Then we click Change. When we click Change, we see that this part is changed. I'm going to change YDO6 to YDO6 reverse. I want you to do the same thing for YDO8 as well. I want you to name YDO8 as YDO8 reverse in the same way, and then I click Change. After doing this, we come to the most important part, old and new values. So, what are the old and new values? SPSS is asking us to explain these. A window like this opens up. Here are our old values. If there was a 1 before, you make it 5. If the old value is 1, the new value should be 5. After writing these, we click Add and we see that they appear here as old and new. Then we set 2 to 4 like this and click Add. Then we set 3 to 3 again. Don't make any changes, but we need to specify 3 as 3 so that it doesn't remain empty later. If you were writing over the same variable, you wouldn't need to do this step here. You wouldn't need to write 3 as 3. But if you're creating a new variable and you don't write this, whenever it sees a 3, it won't do anything or it will remain empty. This will cause you problems. Then we say Add here again. This time, we're doing the opposite. We say make 4 into 2 like this and click Add, and then make 5 into 1 and click Add. Here, we also see that there are different options. We'll explain these in our future lessons. Now, after doing this, let's check it like this. Make the 1s into 5s, just to check one more time. There's no going back from this. Later on, after you've progressed, it's harder to go back and see where you made a mistake. Make 1 into 5, 2 into 4, 3 into 3, 4 into 2, and 5 into 1. So, we see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going downwards, and from here upwards, it's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, now we click Continue. After clicking Continue and then pressing OK, we see that a log record, that is, a transaction record, appears on our screen like this. And in this transaction record, we see that the recode operation has been performed, that this operation was done in YDO6 and YDO8, that 1s became 5s, 2s became 4s, 3 stayed as 3s, 4s became 2s, 5s became 1s, and what into was converted to, that YDO6 reversed and YDO8 reversed were created, and that an output was generated. You can now save this record here if you want, because later on, you might not remember whether you did reverse coding or not. You can look back at this. Or if your advisor asks you, did you do the reverse coding? Can you show this to me? You can show them this record here. Yes, when we do this, we now see that 2 new variables have been added to the last 2 rows in our dataset. 2 new variables named YDO6 reverse and YDO8 reverse have been created. Now, we can make further adjustments on these. We can take the label of the 6th item here and paste it over there. We can also take the label of the 8th item and paste it here as well. Now, if we want to use these items here individually, we just need to change the statements here. Because the statements here have now been reversed, we need to change this part to something like, our managers arrange our working hours fairly according to the work we do. And then again, we can change this part to, I think our managers are helpful people. Oh, we forgot the letter N there. We also need to make a correction here. We can change the option here to, I don't think our managers are helpful people, by fixing the missing N in the statement. Yes, in this way, we've now completed our reverse coding. From now on, when calculating scale scores, we can use these reverse-coded variables here. I'll leave this for our next lesson. I hope this lesson has been helpful. If you have any questions, you can ask them below the video. Also, I'd like to remind you of something. We also have videos on our channel where we've covered these topics before. We remind you of these in the video descriptions as well. I recommend finding the relevant link there and watching that video too, to reinforce this topic. If you liked our video, I'd appreciate it if you could give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe. I wish you ease in your studies. See you in our next videos.